On today's show, we cover all the important upcoming dates and times for your Houston Rockets, as we are just 1 week away from Rockets Media Day, which means we are 8 days away from Rockets training camp starting, and that means we are 13 days away from the very first preseason game. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about NBA strength and conditioning programs and how it looks like Jalen Green has added some muscle mass to his frame, what that added mass could do for a guy like Jabari Smith Jr., and one more Houston Rocket who has benefited from being in the gym consistently this offseason. And then lastly, we're going to talk about Usman Garuba and the Spanish national team as your 2022 EUROBASKET champions. All of that and more coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays, host of the State of the Rockets podcast, as well as Rockets Watch. You can follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets. We are free and available on all podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your pods. Check out this show. We're also on YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Got a lot of topics to get to in today's show. We're going to cover the important upcoming dates for your Houston Rockets. We're going to talk about NBA strength and conditioning programs and how beneficial it looks like it's been for Jalen Green this past summer, what it's going to do for Jabari Smith Jr. further down the line, and one more Houston Rocket who has definitely been in the gym this summer and is going to look a lot better this season because of it. And then lastly, we're going to talk about Usman Garuba, Uzi. Your EUROBASKET champion, Usman Garuba, him and the Spanish national team coming out on top of this year's EUROBASKET tournament. We're going to get to that in segment 3. But let's start with the important upcoming dates for your Houston Rockets, because we are just 1 week away from Rockets Media Day. It's always a ton of fun. It's going to be September 26th, this upcoming Monday, 1 week removed. Media Day is great because we get kind of a first look at all the players. They're wearing jerseys. We're interviewing, select players are going to be out there. Steven Silas will be out there. Rafael Stone will be out there. It'll be all the, Rockets media that you're familiar with, asking questions, trying to gauge where the team is at, what certain guys have been working on in the offseason. And it's always just a ton of fun because it's that first, preliminary primer, just, all right, the season is underway, right? That's kind of the flagpole event of hey, we're back in the swing of things, right? We are back, we're ready to go. And then immediately after Media Day, the Rockets dive directly into training camp. So they're going to hold training camp over in Lake Charles for 3 days from September 27th through the 29th, so 3 days over in Lake Charles. I should be there for training camp. It's not concrete yet, but I should be going. So it should be a ton of fun to be there in person, see what's going on for training camp. I was able to go for a couple days last season, and it's always a ton of fun to kind of get a little sneak peek at some of the scrimmages, the drills being run at the end of practices, and interviewing the players and kind of figuring out what guys are working on, what the expectations are kind of being set as far as just how quickly certain guys are picking things up, the types of lessons that Steven Silas is trying to implement, all that good stuff. So Media Day, training camp, then the very first preseason game against the San Antonio Spurs, just 13 days away, October 2nd. It's going to be a ton of fun. It's going to be our first look at this brand new Houston Rockets team that's going to look, a lot different than last year's team. It's going to be basically, not quite top to bottom, a completely different team, but so many new fresh faces on this team, so many new storylines to follow along. We're going to see different lineups, definitely a different starting lineup for sure. Jabari Smith Jr. and Alperen Sengun, two very different faces starting in the lineup, at the 4 and 5 spots for the Rockets. So that's going to be a ton of fun. And then the last important date that I want to throw in here is 10/17. So October 17th, that is the final date for NBA rosters to be set going into the actual season. So that'll be the date that by then, all the Rockets roster moves and any roster uncertainty, all of that, they won't be able to carry 20 players past that date, right? So that's the effective date where they have to trim down from carrying 20 players on their roster down to 15 plus the two-way contracts. So right now, effectively, the Rockets can carry 20 players plus the two-way contracts. So, effectively 22 names. Pardon me. And so that is the date to keep an eye on as far as when the Rockets have to have all their decisions made by, when they have to have all their moves made by, all that good stuff. And that's effectively, right, you get through training camp and then you get through preseason, and that's how the Rockets have an idea of, like, all right, who's getting cut, who's actually sticking around. Will Willie Cauley-Stein actually be on the Rockets roster this year? Will Bruno Fernando earn a two-way contract and be on the Rockets team, at least on a two-way deal this season? All those questions will be answered more than likely by that October 17th date, as that is officially I believe the eve of the start of the NBA season, and then the season should start the following day right after that. So a lot of very important dates coming up for your Houston Rockets team. And again, it's just exciting that we are right on the cusp of being back to Houston Rockets basketball. I like to joke about it a lot, that I deal with seasonal affective disorder, because when basketball is just not around, it's I'm just depressed without basketball. And it's been really nice to have EUROBASKET to kind of help, scratch that itch a little bit, watching Alperen Sengun play, watching Usman Garuba dominate, for Spain, which we're going to talk about in segment 3, just his impact on the game and some of the takeaways as far as how he can translate some of his play with the Spanish national team, I should say, back to the Houston Rockets, and why, again, I'm incredibly confident about his role and his place on this Rockets team moving forward. So I do want to get to that in a second, but coming up, I do want to actually talk about the Rockets and their, kind of off-season strength and conditioning program, right? I say it a lot. I talk all the time about how so much of the development for these players take place, outside of the actual 48-minute basketball game that we get to watch. And a big part of that, especially for young players, is getting involved with NBA strength and conditioning programs, adding more size to their frame, adding muscle mass, all of that. So I want to talk about 3 specific Rockets: Jalen Green, Jabari Smith Jr., and one more Rocket who's to be named in the next segment. We're going to get there after a quick message from our friends over at Rocket Money. Because look, do you know how much your subscriptions really cost? Like, really, truly, right? Most Americans think they spend around $80-ish a month on subscription services, when the actual total is closer to over $200. That's right. You could be wasting hundreds of dollars each and every month on subscriptions that you don't even know about. There's an app that I love using and that you're going to love too. It's called Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill. The app shows you all your subscriptions in one spot and cancels whatever you don't need, whatever you forgot about, right? And I hate to admit it, but I've forgotten about stuff that I've subscribed to before. It sucks, right? You get dinged on your credit card statement. You're like, I don't remember subscribing to that. Rocket Money can even find subscriptions that you didn't know that you were paying for, right? You may even find out you've been double charged for a certain subscription. And to cancel, all you have to do is click cancel, and then Rocket Money takes care of the rest. Cancel unnecessary subscriptions with Rocket Money today. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Seriously, it could save you hundreds a year. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Let's talk a little bit about NBA strength and conditioning programs and what they bring to the table for teams, especially young teams like the Houston Rockets. Now, I will say really quick before I dive into that, I'm back like I never left. I'm doing much, much better now health-wise. Unfortunately, I had a bit of a diabetic emergency last week. I was in the hospital for a couple days. Bit of a wake-up call, realizing, I need to take my health a little bit more seriously. I appreciate so sincerely every single person who reached out, whether it was DM, text, call, whatever, YouTube comments, just asking, if everything's okay. I do sincerely appreciate you guys reaching out. It sucked not being able to do the show, but I'm back like I never left, and so that's that. So with that, let's talk a little NBA strength and conditioning, right? Because the Rockets have, it's that time of year, the social media team's doing their thing, the digital department doing their thing, and they're posting, little propaganda photos and stuff of the Rockets. And Jalen Green looks bigger. He legitimately does. And it's my understanding, right, that he has actually added 5 to 10 pounds of actual muscle this offseason. Hat tip to our good friend Roosh Williams, who got that scoop. And, you know, if Jalen Green has actually added 5 to 10 pounds of muscle to his frame, it's incredibly exciting to think about what that's going to further unlock for his game, right? Because Jalen's already shown a proclivity to get to the rim almost at will, right? He's got the jets. He can explode past anybody. He's a terror in transition, just an absolute blur. But one of the areas that he struggled with was when he was faced with bigger, stronger defenders last year. At times, he struggled with the contact in and around the rim, right? He struggled to finish through contact or to initiate contact at times in and around the bucket. And hopefully adding a little bit more strength, especially to his upper body, will allow him the opportunity to get to the free throw line, pardon me, with a bit more consistency, but also to then finish through contact and have some and one opportunities, right? Have some opportunities where he can convert, get to the free throw line, knock down the bucket, and, you know, generate some three-point plays. Adding strength to his frame is going to be so important. And he's not done, right, by any stretch of the imagination. This is just one offseason with an NBA strength and conditioning program. And if he was able to add, you know, anywhere from 5 to 10 pounds of muscle in one offseason, think about what Jalen Green's going to look like 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 years from now, right? As he's like, you know, entering his prime, you know, middle of his prime, whatever, when he is truly filled out and he's got the body that is his, you know, complete NBA body and not still growing, not still adding muscle, not still developing, all that stuff. So that's a big part of what is, as far as just the development of these young players and how an NBA offseason, how you see sometimes rookies take that sophomore year leap, right? They can be damn good rookies in their rookie season, but then you give those guys, you know, 3 to 4 months in the lab to work out, to refine their bodies, to work on their game, and to get there, just from the physical component of it, to be in the weight room and to be fully fledged in an NBA strength and conditioning program for 3 to 4 months, rather than having to go through the pre-draft process, all the interviews, the actual draft, summer league, like all that stuff. That's a very different dynamic than, all right, I'm already with the team. I know I'm with the team. What do I need to get better at? All right, these are the skills I'm going to work on. What does my body need, right? And then working on the muscles, you know, adding more to your frame, all of that. So it's going to be great to see the leap that Jalen Green takes this season based on just what he looks like from a physical standpoint. Also, again, that also extends to Alperen Sengun, who looks bigger and stronger, right? During EuroBasket, that was one of the things that I noticed almost immediately was Alp looks like he's added some strength to his body this past offseason. Alp looks bigger and stronger. Usman Garuba looks to be in great shape. We're still going to talk about him in segment 3. Josh Christopher, how much more? I mean, Josh Christopher probably had the most NBA-ready body of any of the 4 of them. How much better is he going to look, physically this next season compared to his rookie campaign? So all of that, and then in addition, Jabari Smith Jr., who looked absolutely swole, lifting like just this gigantic, like, you know, bar filled with, I don't even know how much he was actually lifting. He wasn't like doing like a, you know, deadlift or anything, but anyways, Jabari looks like he's going to be, you know, potentially a few years down the line, Giannis-esque, right? And maybe I'm reaching here a little bit, but Jabari's got that frame, right? He's, you know, 6'10", maybe 6'11". Maybe he's not done growing yet. He's got the broad shoulders. He's got the frame to be able to add easily another 20 to 30 pounds of muscle over time, you know, as he fills out his NBA body. He's listed at 220 right now. Giannis was listed at Giannis was listed around like, I think 200 when he came into the league. And nowadays he's listed at like 245, 250. So Giannis went from like a twig to adding 40 to 50 pounds of muscle, which is absolutely absurd. That's why he's the Greek freak. So it's less of a jump for Jabari to take that leap. But at the same time, because Jabari's starting at a higher place, right? You know, about 220 or so, realistically, adding 20 pounds of muscle over the next, you know, 4 or 5 years is not absurd to think about. And if Jabari gets bigger, right? If he can add more size, more mass to his frame, there's a world where you could entertain the idea of Jabari Smith as more of a full-time 5 who could potentially be a matchup nightmare for opposing teams, right? If he grows another inch or two and he finishes around 6'11", 7 feet tall, and if he's, you know, clocking in at about 240, 245, maybe 250, and he's able to still maintain his lateral quickness, his agility, his ability to switch out onto the perimeter and guard wings and smaller players, you've got a defensive terror on your hands at that point. And then not even to think about the offensive nightmare that he would be as far as, matchup concerns or whatever for other teams who would then have to send their 5 all the way out to the perimeter to check Jabari, and the fact that he's got such incredibly deep range already. Imagining what that's going to look like, a couple years down the line as he continues to grow, add more strength, all of that. So I just want, again, this entire segment, the entire point of segment 2 here in today's show is to hammer home the importance and really emphasize how crucial NBA strength and development programs are and how much money and research is sunk into that to have these players be at their absolute physical peaks and to get them to be the best version of themselves. And the last name that I want to talk about here actually is a name that, is maybe a bit divisive amongst Rockets fans right now, if only because some people don't necessarily view him as part of the, the young core moving forward, and he might, step on the toes of certain fans depending on who gets minutes and who doesn't. But apparently, to my knowledge, Garrison Matthews has actually added a lot more muscle mass back this offseason. Apparently, coming into last year, Gary Bird lost a lot of weight, right? He was built more like a guard last season. And because of that, he wasn't as able to be as physical defensively, right? Gary Bird's not exactly, the fleetest of foot, as far as, defensive expectations are concerned, but he was also a lot smaller physically. And so he wasn't able to really bang with or body with some of the bigger guys that he was checking on the wing last season. Whereas apparently he's added a lot of muscle mass back this offseason, and he's been really working on his defensive intensity. And apparently he's been locking everybody up this offseason in runs and scrimmages, that kind of thing. I'm going to be curious to see it actually translate to the court. But if Gary Bird is suddenly like a defensive plus because he's added muscle back and he's bigger and stronger and more adept defensively, you combine that with the spacing and with what he gives you on offense, and suddenly we're talking about a guy that absolutely deserves his spot in the Rockets rotation. And I'm not talking about just, spot minutes here and there is like, all right, plug him in. He's a microwave scorer. He's either got it or he doesn't one night, because that's kind of been my vision for Gary Bird up to this point. But if Gary Bird can be a plus defender, and if he can be a bit more of a wing rather than a 6'5" guard who at times, is a defensive liability, then that's a bit more of the total package kind of wing that you want, because then you're basically talking about a 3-and-D version of Gary Bird. I'm going to, take it with a bit of a grain of salt. I want to see it actually happen on the basketball floor. I want to see it translate to the court. But right now, I'm very cautiously optimistic about what we're going to see out of Gary Bird this next season, and you should be too. Coming up, I want to talk about Usman Garuba, his impact, his presence for the Spanish national team on their way to their EUROBASKET title. We're going to talk about that coming up in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Let's talk a little about Uzi, who is now, Championship Uzi. Just throwing that out there. But Usman Garuba and the Spanish national team coming out on top in the EuroBasket tournament. They beat France. They beat Rudy Gobert. Look, it's even sweeter, right? The fact that Spain won, that's incredible. I'm proud of Usman Garuba, proud of the Spanish national team. Viva España. But it's even better that Spain beat France after France beat Turkey and Alperen Sengun. So that's just like the chef's kiss on top of it all. But as far as Usman Garuba is concerned, his play throughout all of EuroBasket has been nothing short of impactful. He comes into games and he changes the flow of a basketball game. He makes winning basketball plays, and we know what his defense can be, right? We know that he is a defensive, savant, that he can be impactful on that side, hard hat, lunch pail, does the dirty work, all that stuff, right? Switchable, can guard bigs, can switch onto the perimeter, all those things. But what really stood out, especially over these last 2 EuroBasket games from Garuba, was his passing. Now, this was something that I've talked about before. Usman Garuba is an underrated passer at this point. And I think passing can be a really big part of his skill set. And as far as what we're looking at, on this current Rockets team, on this current Rockets roster, right? I think, and myself included, I think at times we've looked at like Jae'Sean Tate as like, oh yeah, he's so Draymond-esque in his bag and his skill set, the playmaking, this, all that, the defense. I think if you're looking for a Draymond Green type successor, I think it's more so Usman Garuba, right? Because Garuba kind of fits that mold a little bit more so as to how Draymond plays and the types of passes that he makes, operating kind of out of the middle of the floor, out of some dribble handoff sets. Garuba also isn't afraid to, at times he's put the ball on the floor in transition and either driven it in himself off of like a turnover or a steal or created an opportunity for a teammate. And this EuroBasket stretch was exactly what scouts saw back before Garuba was drafted in the first place, right? And this is why Rafael Stone, basically called him the best defender in the world, not in the NBA, because one, he impacts the game so well on that side of the basketball. But then when you couple that with the fact that, yeah, the rest of his offensive game needs work, right? He needs to polish, he needs to, work on some semblance of an inside game a little bit, needs a better ability to just, even just a little hop step and finishing at the rim, that kind of thing. Needs to work on the three-point shot, right? There's still areas of his offensive game that need work. Absolutely. I'm not saying that they don't. But if he can pass at this level, which again, in the semifinals game against Germany, Garuba had 7 assists, and then in the finals game against France, he had 4 assists. Garuba's ability to pass, especially out of the middle of the floor, right? Whether it's, collapsing a zone or whether it's operating out of the short roll, whatever it is, Garuba has good court vision, and he understands how to swing the ball to the next right man, to the open man. And he also, again, he very much fits into that mold of he stays in his lane and does what he does and does well. Throughout all of EuroBasket, there was a running joke with myself and Roosh and Dave, Clutch fans over at Rockets Watch, right? And all the viewers who were tuning in for the EuroBasket games, is that we were counting Usman Garuba's potential screen assists, right? We'd be tallying up, all right, there's one screen by Garuba, another screen, right? Because all he does is he screens and he moves. He screens and he moves. He screens and he moves. And it's very different how Spain utilizes Garuba compared to how the Rockets utilized him in certain stretches last season. I really am hoping that Steven Silas will get a bit more creative with how he utilizes Garuba this season. I really hope that we'll see Garuba be trusted the same way that Alperen Sengun was trusted to run some dribble handoff sets, to run some of the, the sequences within the action of the Rockets offense, rather than just throwing him in the corner and saying, all right, go spot up in the corner and that's all you're going to do. Because he can do more than that offensively, right? And right now, I think if you just throw him in the corner as a spot up three-point shooter, you're not playing to his offensive strengths. One of my favorite lineups to see this next season, and I hope we see it, is basically going to be a primary ball handler, so either Kevin Porter Jr. or Jalen Green, 3 shooters, and then Usman Garuba as the pick and roll threat, or as the primary screen setter, because he's not really a roll threat. But even if he's not really a roll threat or a threat to finish at the basket or a vertical spacing threat, he still has gravity in the pick and roll, because you can't just completely ignore him or it's an absolute wide open dunk. So at that point, you get him in the pick and roll with KPJ or Jalen Green, and as soon as they dump the pass over the top to him or get him a quick little, a little bounce pass between the defenders, if he's in the middle of the floor, kind of around the free throw line, kind of in the painted area, and the defense has to make a decision on whether they want to rotate and cut him off or stay with the shooters, he's going to be able to make those reads and make those high-level decisions. And that's something that not every big man can do, right? We saw Clint Capella struggle to make those decisions from the middle of the floor at times during his peak years with the Houston Rockets back during the 2018 season when they won 65 games. Like, Capella was an incredible big and still is an incredible big, but not every big can be an adept passer, especially from the middle of the floor, breaking down an opposing defense. So I'm incredibly optimistic about what Usman Garuba is going to bring to the table for the Houston Rockets from that backup 5 spot this season. I think that if you didn't get a chance to watch what he did in EuroBasket, the highlights are out there. Go look him up. Garuba was incredible. And again, it doesn't always jump out off the page at you, right? Because he doesn't, he's not out there averaging 15 and 10. He's not, racking up, rebounds or stats, but the way that he plays, he makes winning plays. He impacts the game at a very, very high level. And I think he's very much, by the end of the season, I think Rockets fans are going to realize just how impactful he can be, and then he's going to be kind of carve himself into or cement himself into a spot in the Rockets, consistent 8 or 9 man rotation of the future, because every team could use a 6'8", switchblade, versatile defender who can guard positions 1 through 5 and who can do what he can do offensively. So with that, that's going to wrap up today's episode. As always, appreciate you for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, Odyssey app, free and available on all podcast platforms. We're also on YouTube, so check us out on YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. The comments help out a ton. Remember, for the house, for the team, for the algorithm. Go comment on the show. I would sincerely appreciate it. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.